There are some games where the basic idea is instantly clear. Save the princess, stop the alien invasion, win the race. And then there's Tusker, where your father has wandered off looking for the elephant's graveyard, presumably in search of treasure, ivory, glory, or possibly just because he's completely lost the plot, and now it's up to you to go stomping across half of Africa to find him. Which, when you think about it, is a pretty crappy family-related errand. This was System 3 in 1989 doing what they did best, building a big, atmospheric action-adventure packed with danger, puzzles, and just enough confusion to make you feel clever when you finally work out what on earth you're supposed to be doing. If the last Ninja was System 3's sleek action showpiece, Tusker was the scruffier one. All dust, danger, and enough weaponry to start a small war. One of the first things worth mentioning is that Tusker doesn't give you much to go on. Depending on which version you had, the instructions were so poor you'd think they'd been written by somebody who'd only glanced at the game from across the room. You basically got the software and a vague sense of, right, best of luck. But in a strange way, that actually suits the game. Because Tusker feels like an expedition, not a guided tour, not a pleasant ramble. An expedition. The sort where everything is out to kill you. Half the objects you pick up look vaguely mystical or completely unidentifiable. And dehydration is every bit as deadly as the locals, the wildlife, and the weird supernatural nonsense waiting later on. We start in the desert, and it's a brilliant opening because it immediately feels hostile. Not dramatic in a flashy modern way, just hostile. Dry, empty, dangerous. There's sand stretching off into the distance, bits of equipment scattered about, sword-wielding attackers wandering around like they've been told there's fresh meat in the area, and all the while your water supply is ticking down. That's one of Tusker's best ideas actually. It's not enough just to survive getting stabbed, whacked or bitten, you've also got to keep yourself watered. So right from the start, the game gives you this feeling that you're not some heroic action figure breezing through danger. You're trying to stay alive in a place that would happily finish you off without a second thought. And then there's Tusker himself. I quite like the fact that he doesn't look glamorous. He looks rough, stubbly, hunched, slightly worn out, like a man who's already had enough of this adventure and he's only just started. He doesn't strut around like some polished action hero. He lopes about like someone whose back's gone and who's been sleeping in rocks for a week. It suits the whole game perfectly. Gameplay-wise, this is much more manageable than the slightly fiddlier elegance of The Last Ninja. It uses a flick screen style, but you can still move with a sense of depth into the screen as well as left and right, so it keeps the adventurous feel without constantly making you fight the controls. And that matters because Tusker throws enough at you already without the joystick being your biggest enemy. Combat is simple, satisfying, and occasionally quite funny in a very dark sort of way. At first you can get by with your fists and feet, which already makes Tusker seem like a fairly committed lunatic, but before long you start amassing an absolutely ridiculous arsenal. Dagger, machete, sling, pistol. By the midpoint of this game, you're less an explorer and more a travelling branch of military surplus. And the lovely thing is, the game lets you carry all this gear around like it's perfectly normal. No complaints, no weight system, no realism. Just a scruffy adventurer roaming the wilderness with enough hardware to overthrow a small government. But brute force only gets you so far. Tusker is just as much about figuring things out as it is about smacking things in the face. You're collecting useful items, magical objects, flasks, bits and pieces that you know will matter later, even if at the time they look like abstract art made out of brown pixels. And that's one of the game's little flaws, as well as one of its charms. Sometimes solving a puzzle isn't just about knowing where to use an item, but working out what the item even is in the first place. You spend part of Tusker feeling like a rugged adventurer, and the other part feeling like a man emptying out his pockets onto a table and saying, right, now what in God's name is that supposed to be? Once you push beyond the desert, the game really starts to come alive. The scenery changes, the danger changes, and Tusker starts building this proper sense of journey. The jungle sections are especially good for atmosphere. The screens feel dense and oppressive, like the place is swallowing you up. There are crocodiles, hostile wildlife, strange enemies, and that wonderful old-school sense that every new area might contain either a vital clue or something that's about to kill you stone dead. Then, it gets weirder, and this is where Tusker really earns its personality. You're not just trudging through another generic jungle adventure. The game starts throwing in all sorts of strange horrors and traps. Swamp creatures that burst out at you, bouncing skulls, eerie idols, dangerous temple hazards, hidden routes, false walls, moving floors, all the sort of stuff that makes the whole expedition feel cursed rather than merely difficult. By the later stages, Tusker has moved on from straightforward survival and into something far weirder, and I mean that as a compliment. There's a lovely escalation to it all. You begin with fairly grounded threats: thirst, swordsmen, animals, getting lost, but the deeper you go, the more the game starts to feel like it's dragging you into somewhere old, hostile, and deeply wrong. That sense of progression is one of the reasons it works so well. It doesn't feel like 60 screens of the same thing over and over. It feels like you're pushing further into danger, further from safety, and further into a place that probably should have been left alone. And through all this, the atmosphere is superb. System 3 were always good at making games feel bigger than they really were, and Tusker does that brilliantly. The backdrops have a lot of mood to them. The desert feels hot. The jungle feels heavy and claustrophobic. The village sections feel strange and threatening. The darker areas later on feel properly ominous. It's not just about colourful graphics. It's about how well the screens sell the setting. The sound helps too. The music has that tribal, drum-driven feel that gives the whole thing a relentless pulse. Like the game is always pushing you onward. It's not there just as background noise. It adds to the feeling that this is some dangerous, half-mythical trek into the unknown. Now, Tusker isn't perfect. The instructions, as mentioned, can be laughably poor. Trust me, I've added it to the website if you check the link in the description. Occasionally you'll take damage in ways that feel a little cheap, and there are moments where the game's ambition slightly outruns its clarity. But honestly, I can forgive a lot of that because Tusker has something many technically competent games don't have: character. It has presence. You remember the desert. You remember the weirdness. You remember the water panic. You remember the odd mix of exploration, violence and puzzle solving. And you definitely remember that battered-looking hero trudging onward like a man too stubborn to admit this was an appalling idea from the beginning. That, for me, is what makes Tusker worth talking about. It might never quite reach the iconic heights of The Last Ninja, and it probably doesn't have the same immediate wow factor, but it does have its own identity. It feels harsher, stranger, scruffier, and more unpredictable. Less polished cool, more survival through sheer bloody-mindedness. And sometimes that's exactly what you need. Tusker is the sort of game that pulls you in, because you want to see what madness is coming next. Another puzzle, another trap, another screen full of things trying to murder you. Probably all three. And before long you realise you're completely invested in this daft, dangerous trek to the elephant's graveyard, armed to the teeth, half dehydrated, and one bad decision away from being flattened, stabbed, bitten, or cursed by something ancient, which is really just another lovely day on the Commodore 64. Big thumbs up. If you played Tusker back in the day, let me know what you made of it in the comments, whether you actually completed it, whether you got hopelessly lost, or whether you just spent half your time wandering around the desert wondering what any of your inventory was supposed to be. And as always, if you enjoyed the video, give it a like, subscribe for more Commodore 64 classics, and check out the other games on the channel. Plenty more to come. Thanks for watching, guys, and until the next one, bye for now.